Oh, amazing. Thank you for joining me, Jordan. I am so pumped to have you on.
Bikes. Bikes.
Bikes. Yeah, we'll get on to that because they're very niche.
Dude, thank
How
you
are
for having
you
me.
and how is your beautiful family?
My wife was like, "Wait, so who are you doing the podcast with today?" I was like, "Remember the guy who I went to Tom Segura with?" She was like, "Oh, got it, okay, okay." So, man, I'm very excited to speak with you. And after the Fit Expo, the first year, we didn't really get to keep in touch very much, and I feel like after the second time, we got to spend so much more time together and hang out more and get to know each other. So I'm excited to speak with you now, have you on my podcast soon, and then just stay in touch more and more and more, and hopefully get to see you more frequently than just once a year.
Yeah, me too, man. And give me the opportunity to declare my love for you to begin. Because it's like the strange thing about social media is this, you can sometimes get this preconceived notion of who someone is based
Mm.
on what you see. So, and everything else I'm going to say, I'm going to caveat it with meant in the most respectful way because I knew of you, I enjoyed your content, I liked you, but I think I mentioned to you once or twice before. I'm not a huge like story person
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
find it's almost like the TikTok. It's a rabbit hole. You can end up down people's forever. So I kind of selectively watch them. So I didn't have, and I try not to these days. I think it's something that's come with age, have too much kind of prejudgment with anyone that I've met. Like I mean that in a
Mm.
positive or a negative way. I always just my intention is I take this person how I'm going to find them. Like it's same as if someone tells me something negative about someone I'm about to meet. It's like, no, do you know what? Just let me meet that person. Let me form my own opinions. And I just experienced this immediate warmth with you, this transparency, and this energy of that was reciprocated. I found that although we got chatting, we get to spend a great deal of time with each other. The fact that you was talking about at the time the prospect of becoming a father and the things that you valued, like
Mm.
I got a really good energy from you from the off. And I wanted to give you that space as well with that first year of parenthood, which is why I checked in on you a couple of times to see how
Yeah,
things
yeah.
were going. But we'll get onto that because that turned your whole world upside down.
Man, it really did. It's been a wild, wild ride. And so my daughter just turned, she's a little over 9 months now. So it's been amazing in every way. I'll share something that I made it up yesterday. I was trying to explain to one of my friends what it felt like to like love my daughter. And I was saying before I had a kid, I would hear people talk about it and I'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I understand, but like I really didn't get it. And I came up with sort of an analogy that I think describes it pretty well. Have you ever heard people like I have nothing against drugs, but I've never done like mushrooms or anything like that. And like I've heard people say that when they do that, they're like, oh my God, I could see new colors that like didn't exist before. And that for me is how I feel about the love that I feel for my daughter, where it's like I unlocked a new emotion. Like it's almost like this level of love didn't exist before.
Mm.
It's like I had never felt this emotion until I met my daughter. And until like now, as I watch her grow, it's like it gets more and more and more pronounced. And so for me, like that's what it's been like over the last 9 months. Just like I have an emotion that I've never felt before. And so that's been what it's been like in the most amazing way.
Yeah, it's looking at life through an entirely different lens. And exactly as you say, like a lot of that resonates with me because don't get me wrong. I think like you're married, I'm married. There is that love between you from a relationship standpoint, but the unconditional love which comes from a child, like something,
Mm.
and this is not me pushing my ideas onto anyone because I know people decide not to have children. That's fine. I know,
Yeah, yeah.
unfortunately, lots of people that spend their lives wanting children that unfortunately can't. So I do take it as a great gift and a great privilege that you get to bring this incredible being into the world. And I feel like I'm still winging it. I feel like I don't fully know what I'm doing. Yet I've been given this responsibility with these small humans, and I can actually hear Jax banging on the window now. They're in the garden today, and he's trying to get my attention because he's a mischievous 2-year-old. And I can now see my wife freaking out, like I can't believe he's doing a podcast, but it's fine. Yeah. So how is the beautiful family?
Dude, thank God everyone's good. Actually, So you know when we were in the bus on the way to the expo and you were talking about hand, foot, and mouth,
Mm.
and I said, and I remember saying this, I said, "Oh, we don't have that in the States." And I remember saying that so confidently because I had never heard of it. And then as soon as I got back to the States, brought it up to someone and they're like, "Yeah, we absolutely have that here."
Oh,
And
really?
now I hear about it all the time.
It's
Like
like the
just
yellow car thing, isn't it? You don't see that many yellow cars, and you see one, and they're everywhere.
everywhere. My buddy just said, "Yeah, like my son, he's in daycare, he just got hand, foot, and mouth." It's like everyone is now saying it, and I had never heard it before. I just think it's ridiculous that I said with the utmost confidence to you, "Oh yeah, we don't have that in the United States."
You weirdos in the UK only just get it.
So yeah, dude, everyone's great. It's Sunday when we're recording this, so my daughter's gonna go down for a nap, and then we're gonna spend the day together. We're gonna go on a little like hike, walk, more of a walk, but like
You always been Dallas? Is it? Have you always been based in Dallas?
no. So I grew up in Boston. I've been all over. So I grew up in Boston, and then from Boston, I actually lived in Israel for a while, and then from Israel, I went to Delaware, where I went to school. And then I went back to Boston for a little while, then back to Israel, then New York City for 5 years, and now Dallas.
Oh wow, amazing! And you still go to Israel quite often for holiday, right?
Yeah, I used to go at least like 2 to 3 times a year. Now it's probably going to be more like once a year. It's a
Mm.
big trip with a little baby. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
yeah,
it gets
so
more
it's
challenging a little bit older they get as well.
ex- yeah, I believe that. So it's a long flight. It's like
Yeah.
14 hours from here. So to put her through that's a little bit tough.
What's been the biggest surprise for you since becoming a father that you perhaps surprised yourself?
Man, so there's a lot of big surprises, and I sort of spoke about one of them just in terms of the amount of emotion that I have at any given moment. I never used to be like a very the way I explain it is like I've always had these emotions, but in order to make me cry before, I used to have to break down like 10 steel doors before I would ever feel like the thought of crying. Now it's like I have this like bristly wooden wall that's like terribly made, and all you have to do is breathe on it and it falls down and I'm crying. It's just like the levels, the amount of difficulty it takes to make me cry is minimal at this point. And I could be watching a TV show or whatever it is, and I'll just get very emotional. So that's a huge surprise for me that I really didn't expect. um i think I think one of the best things that has come from it thus far is I knew like I've always worked pretty hard. I've always worked pretty hard, and I've spent a lot of time working, and I've enjoyed it. It's not been a struggle for me. Um, but in my mind, it's always been one of those things where it's like I need more balance. I need to take more time away from work. But it's always been really difficult for me to do that. Now it's not really that difficult. Now it's actually quite easy for me. Like the other day, I used to do 2 to 4 podcasts a day every single day from 2018 up until my daughter was born. And even after she was born, I was still doing 2 to 4 podcasts a day, 5 days a week. But a couple months ago, I told my assistant, I was like, we need to nix this. I need to do 2 a week at most. Like that was like, so we rescheduled my whole schedule. So now it was just 2 a week, which is way better for me. But then the other day, I was on a conference call and I knew I had a podcast afterwards. And on the conference call, I texted my assistant. I was like, "Hey, could you just email the person I'm supposed to have a podcast with and apologize and say I really need to spend time with my family. Like I need to just reschedule the podcast." Which before, never. It's like, shut up, just do it. You agreed to it, get the work done. And now I'm just like, I don't have that many more hours in the day. I need to spend it with my family. So we're just going to reschedule this podcast. Whereas before it would have been like, you can't lose this opportunity. It's really, really important, whatever it is. And it's like, no, like this is top priority number one always. And that's just been this crazy shift that
Mm.
I didn't have to work on. It's just like, this is life now. So that's been a great surprise.
Yeah, that reminds me of two things actually. Firstly, it's that if it fits your narrative, I think we've all got justifiable reasons for telling ourselves stories sometimes, especially when you're caught in that hustle of I have to work because like there's always a reason we give ourselves to solidify that. I was also thinking about more from like a behavior change standpoint, and probably the work that we do with people is that the want and will sometimes isn't enough. That has
Yeah.
to be layered in multiple levels of value. So the
Mm,
fact that you value that time with your family so much more makes it an easy decision. Like in your mind, there's no weighing things out. And I think sometimes when we talk about balance, especially in our space, the health and fitness space, it's sometimes over glamorized in that if you want to excel at anything, you have to fall out of balance. But perhaps when you realize that sometimes what you want and truly desire is right under your nose already, you make a
yeah.
concerted effort to shift your energy that way. So, yeah, that's really interesting. Did you find, and I think when we have in our own formative years, we have all these lessons based on our own parents of some of the values and things that we want to take over. We spoke a little bit about personally about faith and stuff. How I've always almost been a bit jealous of that and envious of that in people because I've never really had faith in my life, and
Mm.
over exceptionally hard life experiences, that's maybe something I've craved. But is there anything, without me delving in too deep? I
You
guess
can go as deep as you want, bro. What?
no, I guess because I can certainly reflect on things that I was exposed to younger, which have, I think, made me a better father now because I know in my mind that's not what I want to be. Because I think it goes two ways, right? We can either mirror and think, I want to emulate that. I want to transfer those skills. I want to pass that down the generations to. That is something I want no part in, and I won't be sharing that with anyone.
Dude, I was just talking about this with my wife the other day. Um, because we both have family members, parents that were not good parents.
Mm.
I'm unbelievably close with my mom, very, very close with my mom. And I think one of the reasons I'm so close with her is because I don't have a relationship with my father. I don't like to shit talk someone, especially when they can't give their side of the story. But quite frankly, he just wasn't good at being a dad, to put it lightly. And the there's a lot of research showing that if you grow up in an abusive household, then you are more likely to be an abusive parent, right? But there's also a fair amount of research showing that it's either that or the complete opposite, where it's like you go the complete opposite direction. And I don't have the research to prove this, but I believe a large part of what you do as you get older and like the type of parent you become or type of person you become, as even if you're not a parent, is a lot of who you surround yourself with. And I have a feeling that if you see one thing growing up and you see a parent acting a certain way, whatever it is, and then you hang out with people who also do that same thing as you get older, that's what you embody. Whereas I was talking to my best friend Mike Vacanti the other day, and I had a moment where I just thanked him because I was like, thank God you're a huge part of my life, because the way that he acts very much showed me that the way my father acted was completely not what I want to do. And it solidified that is an inappropriate way to be a husband and a father. And so uh, I think for me, surrounding myself with people that did the complete opposite or that do the complete opposite of what I saw really reinforced, like, okay, that is not the route we're going down. That's not the right way to live. So yeah, it's I don't even know where I got started on that, but yeah, it's like seeing what I grew up with. I went the complete opposite direction, partly because I knew I didn't want to go through that, and partly because I was very blessed enough to be surrounded by people who were acting in the complete antithesis of what I saw.
Yeah, me too. A lot of that resonates. I think, we had quite a candid chat. I didn't have a positive male role model growing up myself. So it was that exposure to, I guess, the damage that I saw as something I didn't want to pass on. So, I think that takes, and don't get me wrong, this is taking time to cultivate like a sense of self-compassion, whereas you can actually recognize what you're doing is courageous, although very difficult, because
Mm.
to be that one that breaks the cycle, especially when you can perhaps look down, and there's a cultural element to our mine as well, Mediterranean background, there is a certain like male archetype, there is a hierarchy of how men treat women and what men can do and what women can't do. And I can reflect on that now. And I can feel proud of myself for being that bit of a cycle breaker. But to your point is, how are you supposed to know different if you're not exposed to it, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you're in this little echo chamber where all the men are treating their partners like that, they're treating their children like that. How are you meant to learn and grow from that? So, huge kudos to you, and I hugely respect that having that ability to reflect. I don't think everyone has that. I don't think everyone has that level of emotional intelligence to notice the behaviors that they maybe don't want to emulate and pass on to future generations. So I do think that's incredibly tough.
Yeah, man, 100%. It is, and even if you don't feel like you should be acting that way internally, but if everyone else around you is acting that way, and then almost looking down on you for not acting that way, then you might concoct this fake idea of what you think you should be based on everything that you see, and then would lead you to act in a way that isn't congruent with what you think is right. So that's why I think it's so important to surround yourself with the people that really do live in a way that you think is the right way to live, as opposed to just mirroring what you saw growing up.
Hmm. And I'll speculate here, and I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I think that's especially important for men as well. Not the distinctly male and female thing, but I think when you've got these classic archetypes that we're being exposed to, is if there is a conflict and there are certain aspects of, I guess, masculinity now that maybe were glorified in the past, that you can kind of identify, I'm not really with that. If you grow up trying to mirror that behavior and feeling that inner turmoil the whole time, yeah, you've got society crying out saying we want men more vulnerable, more honest, more disciplined, and all these other things. You can grow up a very confused man these days.
Dude, 100%. I even think about, there are so many things that we hear growing up as like, what is an attractive man, right? So the first one is like tall, dark, and handsome, right? It's like, okay, so I don't know if they say that in the UK, but they say it here in
Yeah,
the US.
yeah, that's
Tall, dark, and handsome. So I'm 5'4", so I'm like, I'm fucked immediately. Like, I'm a short dude. But the other one that is very common is, I remember this growing up all the time, the strong and silent type. I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase. Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah.
want
We have
the
that over
strong.
here.
That is literally the exact opposite of what many women say they want now, which is like, I want you to talk about your feelings. I want you to be open. I want you to be vulnerable. Strong and silent means you're strong and you shut up.
Mm.
You don't
Suffer
talk
in
about your
silence.
feelings.
Yeah,
You
you
just like,
push that shit down and get a stomach ulcer from it.
exactly, right? So it's funny because I know a lot of people who say, yeah, it's like men being bad influences on men, and I know that does exist, but a lot of it is like, well, what have we been told is attractive?
Mm.
And that's how we will present ourselves. So if we're trying, if especially before you get married and before you decide, if you decide to have kids or are able to have kids, it's like, so much of how we act in our younger years is solely from what we believe is an attractive perspective, because that's what we want to do. Often we want to find a mate, we want to find a partner. So like, all right, if we're being told attractive for a guy is strong and silent, then that's what we're going to practice. And so, and then it creates that habit of pushing it down. Don't talk about how you feel, because apparently that's not attractive.
It's a counter narrative, right? And that's what we're being exposed to positively now. But I do see that as a challenge, because it's, as you say, it's nothing that we've been exposed to growing up. And we know there's almost like some safety in that as well, because I know culturally, like as a society, you're accepted as a man if you are that classic type. We call it a stiff upper lip over here, strong-willed, keep your feelings to yourself.
A stiff upper lip.
A stiff upper lip. We're getting to some terminology, because I know I like to throw you off. Well, I just confused you unintentionally. I said about
That's so
chucking on a
funny.
jacket, didn't I? When we
Yeah,
when
you
we
said,
were
oh,
on
I
our,
forgot about that.
you were
Chucking on
like,
a
what's
jacket.
chucking? I was like, like throwing.
Because sometimes chuck can be used as like throwing up here in the United States. I was like,
Yeah,
chucking on a
chucking up. Yeah, we
jacket.
say chucking up over here as well. We like to confuse each other. Yeah, so when you're being exposed to that growing up, as there's almost like some safety in that, because you're going to be accepted by men. You're likely going to be accepted by the broadest population of women. So when you've got this pull to be kind of something, there's no guarantee of safety with that. There's no guarantee of that you won't be rejected. And one of,
Mhm.
I think, the most damaging things for any kind of psyche, male or female, but especially men, is rejection. Rejection, or it feels awful for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's a risk, being vulnerable, especially when you don't have an understanding, or you don't have any vulnerability reflected back at you. So I know I can have these conversations with you because you're going to be
Mhm.
receptive, you're going to be open to it. I also know I have friends that I'm very close friends with, I wouldn't have these conversations with, because it just, I would probably perhaps be disappointed with how they responded. And
Yeah.
they would think, what the fuck is that guy talking about as well?
That's so true. That I think I'm actually glad you brought that up. That's something where, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone discuss this. That is one of the worst feelings in the world when you like do open up and you do decide to be vulnerable, and then the response you get sucks. You're just
Yeah.
like, you're like, all right, I'm ready to discuss this and to be open, and then it's just like, in for whatever reason, in whatever capacity, the response is just not there. You're like, all right, well, there goes that discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I always challenge, and it's not because I don't believe there's value in it, but when we was talking about like mental health and things like that, is there's this narrative around strength in speaking, right? And I do
Mm,
think like that is an innate skill that a lot of people don't have. It doesn't, again, it's not distinctly a male thing.
yep.
This ability to articulate and put into words exactly what they're experiencing at any one time. But certainly something I've found and struggled with in the past is this ability to listen and respond appropriately and deal with someone when they're most vulnerable. Because as you say, when you pour your heart out to someone and you're met with maybe quite a disappointing response. You're not only disappointed, you feel a little bit humiliated, you feel a bit rejected, you feel
Yeah.
extremely vulnerable. You're then mistrusting because you think that they might possibly tell other people, it'd be misinterpreted. You end up catastrophizing the situation. So it means any future experience of that, you're going to be more withdrawn and less likely to share. So definitely, I think there's certain friendships, and without it sounding too crass, that serve different purposes in relationships. Like
Yeah.
I've got some wonderful friends that they'll always be there. Some of my oldest friends. We'll always hang out. We'll always catch up. We don't can't even if we don't see each other for 6 months. Getting together, it's like we've never not seen each other. But also, if I've got real shit going on, they're perhaps the ones I don't pour my heart out to. That's not a slight on them. That's more a self-preservation thing.
Dude, absolutely. I mean, there's not every single one of your friends. Like, listen, I can't be everything
Mm,
for everyone, right? Like, I can't be the best for every single person in my life, and I can't expect every single person in my life to be the best for me at all times in the same way. It's like you said, it's not a slight on them at all. It's just, I understand that, like, for whatever reason, this isn't a type of conversation that is going to be conducive for our friendship. So I'll find another friendship. And that's why it can be so helpful to, what a blessing to be able to have multiple different friends that, like, okay, for this type of thing, I can go here, this type of thing, I can go here, which I can also really understand why, if you don't have that type of community around you,
mm,
then you can feel so alone because you can't express it to anybody. And you said something about like, about listening, and about how it's an art and a skill in order to listen almost in, I would say, like, the right way. And especially when someone is opening up and being vulnerable, what I've found is one of the most disheartening is when you decide to open up, and the person you're that is listening, they immediately make it about them. That, I think, is one of the worst ways to be a listener, where it's like, you like, hey, I'm going to tell you about me, and then the first words out of the mouth are like, oh my god, yeah, I went through something similar, here's what happened to me. It's like, that's not.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes the response is that sounds really awful. That sounds tough. I'm sorry to hear you going through that. Do you know, I try and see this situation with as much compassion as possible. And obviously, I'm being level-headed now because I'm rationally thinking about it. At the time, not so much. At the time, you're really intolerant about it. But I try to see it as, a lot of the time, people are just dealing with their discomfort. It's how can I make myself feel better about this situation? This person's obviously telling me something that's really heartfelt, important to them. It makes me feel quite uncomfortable because you're not that sort of individual. How can I relate to them on some level?
Yeah.
Even if it's the entirely different response. Because yeah, the other thing is to offer something that's similar, or to fix is, oh, like, you're feeling a bit sad, have you tried not feeling sad? I just can't get out of my own head. I just worry have you tried not worrying? Yeah, it's like, the stupid shit that people say. But I think we're all responsible for that. We're all deeply flawed humans. We all say stupid shit. It's just the ability to reflect on it and try and do better next time.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. And I think you also hit on a really good point, understanding that we're all flawed and we're all
Mhm.
going to make mistakes in the same way. Someone who wasn't being a good listener for me, I guarantee I've been a poor listener for someone else in some situation, and having empathy and understanding. Listen, rather than getting mad, just understanding this is what it is for this situation, rather than getting upset and saying like, you're terrible, moving on, finding someone else that I might be able to express that to, or just being open and saying, listen, I'm trying to have this conversation, but I feel like you're not listening the way that I
Mm.
need you to right now, rather than just bottling it up and pushing it down and having the resentment and be like, listen, I'm telling you this right now. With all due respect, I don't want to hear about what you went through similar to this. I'm really just trying to talk about this situation, and being very open and blunt, I think, can be super helpful in getting that point across.
Yeah, people don't understand subtleties, do they? They don't, we take for granted that people they understand us on our terms when we need to better understand their listening capabilities sometimes. And also, like, there's lots of grey in between. It could be they're having a particularly tough day. It could be that they're going through a ton of shit themselves that they haven't shared. Like,
Mhm.
so cognitive capacity wise is they just can't possibly take anyone else's stuff on right now. I've certainly been in that situation. I'm kind of grateful. I mean, I'm fairly straight talking, hopefully, from what you know of me, but
Yeah,
to a sensitive point in that if I was feeling that way, and I have done in the past, like to friends, like I'm really sorry, just give me a week or so just to wrap my head around my own stuff, and I love to meet up for coffee and kind of go through these things because, again, we have our own limits, right?
dude. One of the things that there's a moment in which my respect for you 10x'd. There's one moment in which this happened. Do you know what I'm going to say?
I don't, but you're making me feel all sorts of uncomfortable because you're saying something positive about me. That's my problem, though.
So it's it's the small things that you really start to notice in someone, that like it's rarely the big things, it's the small things, like when you see someone, whether they hold the door open for someone or they don't hold the door open for someone, can be a big deal in terms of how you feel
Mm.
about that person. There is something that you did that just massively made me respect you even more than I already did, which was after a long day at the Fit Expo, we were all getting onto the into the bus or into the van, and you said, "Hey," and very kindly, "I'm gonna put my headphones in, and I just can't talk right now." And you were very open and you were very honest about it. And you weren't like, "Hey, motherfuckers, don't talk to me." You were like, "I'm really drained. I just need some alone time." And we were all in this van together. So the way you got your alone time was telling us, "I really can't talk right now because I'm super drained. I'm going to put these in. I'm not ignoring you. I'm not trying to be rude. I just need some time to myself." Like that to me was something that is not done enough in general, where people don't advocate for themselves enough
Mm.
because they're afraid of hurting someone's feelings. And as a result, they dig themselves into a deeper and deeper hole until eventually then they explode or something happens and they have a breakdown. But because you advocated for yourself in that moment, hopefully you were able to get some semblance of a mini recharge to your battery so that that didn't happen. And
Yeah.
no one was offended by it. Everyone was like, "Yeah, that's great, bro. Like,
I
do your
mean, like, you guys need to take some credit for that because part of that is a reflection of you and kind of like all of you that I felt comfortable with to have that conversation. I don't know whether I would in every circumstance, but with those weekends as well, you've experienced a good few of them now. Like they are full on.
oh, it's intense,
I
bro."
had my mishap with our nice Greek dinner the night before, so I didn't get a bunch of
Oh
sleep.
yeah, yeah, you got some food poisoning. Yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah, for the sake of just quickly for the people that are listening, is we went out for a lovely Greek meal the night before after the opening of the expo. And I think possibly because I don't think anyone else touched it. The octopus that was part of the
Yeah.
meze that decided to wake me up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
My body wanted to eject that pretty quick, and I didn't get a great deal of sleep. But fortunately, once it was ejected, I was okay. But I wouldn't risk too much that day. But so by the end of the day, plus the whatever it was, 45 minutes back to the hotel in the minibus.
yeah, and you had like a 7-hour drive to the event, and then we went out, right? It was like you had a
Yeah,
7
yeah, yeah.
drive,
That's
right?
that's true. Yeah.
Left your family, 7-hour drive to the event, and then you got to the hotel, had the whole event. Then we went out to eat, woke up at 2 in the morning, and then you had a long day of talking to everybody and like constantly being on. That is very difficult when you're always on,
Mm.
where you don't get 30 seconds just to be with yourself, where it's just like there's definitely a stress response to where you're surrounded by hundreds, if not thousands of people blaring loud
Oh,
music.
yeah. It's just sensory overload, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. That's why like a number of times throughout the day, I would just like go on a walk around
Yeah.
Manchester. Just
Yeah.
like time to myself. I'm just going to go on a walk. Just, it
But
was a
you had
beautiful day.
it's 12-hour flight for you, right? On the
Uh,
Friday,
yeah,
is that right?
I had two flights. So I went from Dallas to New York, which was about like 3 or 4 hours, and then from New York to Manchester, which that was I think like 8 to 10 hours or something.
Yeah. So a lot of traveling time.
Yeah, yeah, that was a
And
lot.
then, but again, something that I respect you for is you went outside and had a sleep,
Yeah.
because I feel like this is the perfect segue, because we can't do this podcast without telling this story, because I
Yeah.
feel like the planets aligned, and if it had been planned, it wouldn't have happened. It was serendipitous circumstances. You had gone for a little nap, right?
Yeah. Just outside on the
Outside. I
sidewalk.
mean, do you want to tell it or shall I tell it? Because
I think you should tell it. I
I
think
might
you're,
get too excited.
yeah.
And we've been hunting for you, couldn't find you. I think I called you, and you were just like, oh, just, just asleep on the floor. And I thought, well, no, you said I'm asleep outside. And then I thought, okay, I'll go see. And you were actually asleep on the floor outside the building. Should have done that. That is what I should have done. And then you casually said to me, are you a fan of stand-up comedy? And I was like, yeah, I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedy. And it was the way you worded it. You was like, have you heard of a guy called Tom Segura? I was like, yeah, one of my favorite comedians. And then you came out with this proposition. I was like, no, this is kind of made up. And perhaps you can give your take from it, because how the offer came about. Because
Yeah.
if you hadn't have mentioned it to me, we wouldn't have had one of, seriously, the best experiences of my life.
So I get a fair amount of DMs, and I try and answer as many as I can, but I miss more than I answer. Um, so I'm across the world. I live in Dallas, Texas. I'm in Manchester, United Kingdom. I somehow stumble across a DM from someone I've never spoken to before with a photography account. His name is Shaun Nix Photography. And I
Shout out to Sean.
shout out to Shaun. And I've never spoken to him before. And I get some weird messages, like people weird offers, like all the time. So I get, hey, Jordan, I'm Tom Segura's personal trainer, and we're doing and he's doing a show out here in Manchester. Do you want tickets to a show tonight? Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, why would Tom Segura's personal trainer have a Shaun Nix photography account that like has nothing to do with personal training or fitness? I'm like, this just sounds weird. So I Google Tom Segura's his schedule, and to see if he was having a show that night at the Apollo O2 Theater. And I was like, oh, okay, so all right, so that lines up. So I reply and I'm like, hey man, that's super kind. Yeah, sure, I would love tickets. And he goes, okay, awesome. Would you like backstage passes as well? And now I'm like, this is crazy. Like, and I'm looking on his page. I don't see anything of Tom there. I'm like, I don't know. Like, is this guy gonna try and kill me? I don't know. It's weird. Like, is he trying to lure me out into the public? I don't know. So I was like, yeah, bro, I would love backstage passes. And he was like, okay, awesome. The show's at 8:15 tonight. They'll be there for you at the box office. And he told me that he had an extra ticket for me as well. So I was like, all right, well, I'm definitely going to bring a friend with me. I'm not going to go, like, stand-up comedy is way better with someone else as opposed to just by yourself. Like, I can always appreciate it by myself, but with someone else, it's always better, especially someone else who appreciates it. So just fortuitously, the first person I asked is you. I was like, hey man, do you like stand-up comedy? And you're like, bro, I love stand-up comedy. I was like, oh, amazing. And I was not sure how I wanted to phrase the next question, but Tom Segura can be what a lot of people would say, a very offensive stand-up comedian, and a lot of people don't like that type of comedy. So I was like, I wanted to make sure, like, do you like Tom Segura? And you were like, oh my God, I love Tom Segura. He's one of my favorites. And I was like, okay, let's go. And I said, listen, man, I have gotten this pretty crazy offer from this photographer that I don't know if it's real or not, but there's a show at 8:15 tonight. I looked on Google, like it's real. Maybe we should just go to the box office, see if this is going to happen. And you're like, yeah, let's go. So We go to the box office. You actually get this on camera, like me going
Yeah,
in,
I've got this.
try-
I've got this
and
because
like
we didn't know what was going to happen, right?
I had no idea if they were just going to be like, there's no tickets here for you. Like, and then we go out and then I get shanked. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen. Like that, dude, that's a
A
big thing
big
in my mind.
elaborate ploy just to get you.
So we go there. The people at the box office are like, yep, here you go. Like, here are your tickets. And I was like, are there backstage passes as well? They were like, no back. I was like, all right, cool. That's fine. We don't need that. This is plenty. And then we walk out and he's right there. Shaun is standing right there. He's like, we give him a big hug, gives us the backstage passes. And now I'm just like dopamine overload. I can't believe this is going on. I can't believe I got these tickets. I can't believe backstage passes. Like this is just wild. And Shaun, by the way, lives in Texas as well. He lives in Austin, so only a few hours away from me. We're just happened to be all the way across the world in the same exact place at the same time. And I happened to see this message among hundreds and thousands of messages that I usually miss. So then we get these amazing seats and watch one of the greatest stand-up comedy sets I've ever seen in my entire life. And, just like we're losing our shit laughing. It's just one of the most amazing experiences. Then it ends. And when he said backstage passes, my mind thinks of 20 to 50 people backstage in a big party.
That's what I had in mind. If it was going to happen,
Yeah.
because because the whole theater cleared out, didn't it?
Yeah. Whole theater's gone. I was like, there's got to be like 20 to 50 people back there with music and drinks. And like, that's what I, in my mind, thought backstage passes were. Keep in mind, this is Tom Segura's 301st or 302nd show, like in a row on this tour. So I'm sure like he wouldn't want to do that. But that's what I had thought in my mind. We get up there and it's you and me, Tom, Shaun, his trainer, and then the guy who opened for Tom. There's just 5 of us. That's it. And it's like, this is wild, bro. I cannot believe it. And the first thing Tom says, my brother does stand-up comedy. And the first thing that Tom says when we walk in, he goes, "You're Lee's brother?" Like, that was crazy. And I texted my brother that, and that made him feel really good. But just like one of the most incredible experiences of my life. And I was so happy to be able to share that with you. Like you texted me about it, how we were like bumping each other's elbows, just like losing our shit over the jokes. Like it was one of the greatest experiences of my life.
I was so grateful to you. I think that hopefully I've said that enough for it to come across. But I was so grateful for this experience because it was. I was trying. I think we both agreed. Like I was explaining to my wife, and I said, I know if that came up for me, for example, the high unlikelihood that would come up for me, that was offered to me, and I took my wife. Like she'd have a few chuckles, but it wouldn't be the same because she's not a fan. But the fact that all those things happen, the planets aligned, we shared that experience. As I said, like the fact that we was like elbowing each other into the sides in hysterics, and that we've still got catchphrases which we say like, "What the dog's tits?" Like that's going to be from the new special, but I'm not going to ruin that bit. And when we walked into that room, I was like, "Just be cool, just be cool," and I just couldn't be cool. I couldn't be cool at all. And I don't know what he thought of me. I don't know what you thought of me at that time. Because those beers that, I told you I'm not a huge drinker. I don't not drink. I just don't drink often. And I think it was a day of not eating a lot, being quite busy. That was getting to my head. And then Shaun offered us a Guinness when we walked in there. I don't even drink Guinness. But I was like, I'm not going to turn away a Guinness with one of my favorite all-time comedians. And do you remember what I said to Tom?
It was a line from one of his jokes. I forget which one though.
Yeah, as tell the line is, "Tell that motherfucker I appreciate him." And I just said, "Look, I'm probably never. I'm spilling my guts out. By the way, I'm not playing it cool at all. So I'm going to probably embarrass myself by saying it. I've got to say it. Like even if I got turned out, then I think even if he called security or something, I would have been still pleased with myself.
Yeah, like you had to say
I think
it.
it was because it was a few specials ago. It was like he hasn't heard that in a while, so he got a smirk out of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was giving an account of this to a friend who's a massive Tom Segura fan as well because he couldn't believe it because I sent him just a picture, and I almost feel like because that was such a special, sacred thing, is like a couple of people have said, "Oh, what did you talk about?" And I don't want to go into details because I feel like that was such a
Yeah.
I don't think that would be a cool thing to do anyway, to go over like the intricacies of someone. Not that it was super private, but just what you had in a private conversation, but just like exactly what I'd hoped for. Because you hear about these stories, don't meet your heroes or don't meet people you look up to. Because
Yeah.
I mean, they must be flooded by fans and whatnot all the time. But the fact that he was just a sound guy, like really polite, showed interest. I found it like he showed interest in us and asked about families and things like that. I just thought that was a really cool thing. So the fact that happened purely by accident on a weekend that we were working in air quotations for the sake of the listener, yeah, that was pretty incredible.
The thing that blew me away, aside from him being super nice and all that, like this was his 301st or 302nd straight show. He's been on tour since 2021. We has a wife and 2 kids back home, and he took an hour of his time after the show
Mm,
just hang out and talk. Like he did not have to do that. That was
mm,
I couldn't imagine how tired he was, how drained he was. Like think about how drained we were after one day at the Fit Expo. Like I couldn't imagine how drained he must be. And there's this thing that I experience on a very small level compared to someone like Tom Segura, where you're always like questioning like what's the intent of the people who are approaching you, what's the intent of the people, like why are they here, what do they want from you type thing, because it
mm,
happens, like people just they often want something from you. And for him to take that amount of time and spend that amount of energy after already expending so much energy, so much time, is just like i I respected him as a comedian before, and that just made me respect him as a human so much more.
mm. To that point, actually, and if you don't mind me talking about you for a moment, that is
Yeah.
what I found so amazing about you. You know, it's going to sound like gushing to anyone listening, but just being honest and candid, which I like to think I always am with you anyway. Is that I got to know you as a person before I knew of you and the things. Obviously, you've achieved amazing things, but I didn't know too much of that. And like I mean that in the most respectful sense, just because I'm a little bit of an introverted character. I keep myself to myself. Like it's not. I don't get caught up in that. But you're kind of a like I've found out over the years and stuff. You're kind of a big deal, man. Like but what I mean, I don't mean that to make you feel uncomfortable, and I don't mean that as in like a gushing fanboy statement. More that I'm just really grateful that I got to know you as a man, what you value, um, like who you are as a person before I got to know fitness,
Yeah. Yeah.
Jordan, which is why so far we haven't even spoken about fitness.
Thank
And that
God.
was that's pretty much why I wanted to talk to you on the podcast, because my podcast is there's no like real intent behind it. It's much to the annoyance of a lot of people, especially in our industry. There's not the intent to like sell or excel
Yeah.
my business. It's just a little passion project. I want to get people on here I would just like to converse with, love to get know them on a deeper level. And I think it'd be really fascinating for people to hear a bit more about them as a person. Because I think so much of our identity gets tied up in what we're known for and what we do. People lose that humility. You see it sometimes, I think, especially with Insta fame and things like that. You see it go to people's heads. It's
Yeah.
like everyone's corruptible. I think money and fame are two of those things. So when you combine the two with Instagram fame, especially in our industry, is you do see it corrupt people.
Oh my God, dude, it's bad. It's really, really
So
bad.
it
And
almost makes me feel a bit sad the fact that you mentioned that when people approach you, is you don't sometimes know what their intent is,
yeah, yeah,
because
100%.
that's something that's never, I've had the privilege of never having, that doesn't even cross my mind, because it's just I take people for face value, whereas that's almost a worry or a concern that you have. How do
Yeah,
you manage
yeah.
that?
How do I manage it?
Like as in, like, do you have like a a
So I
litmus
mean,
test for good human that
I
you
always
kind of
try and
take
give
people
people
through?
the benefit of the doubt, um, which can be difficult, but it's it's so funny. Like talking, we're not going to talk about fitness. I'll talk about from when I was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching. I kept trying to come up with the system to find out before I started working with a client if we were actually going to be a good fit. I kept trying to come up with the right system and the right questions to ask. And based on their answers to those questions, would we be a good fit? And I failed miserably. I never came up with the right way to figure out because there were times where before I started working with someone, based on the answers to the questions, I'd be like, oh, this is going to be an amazing fit. And then it was explosively awful. Or the exact opposite, where I was like, I really don't think I should take this person on. This is going to be really bad. And it becomes one of the best working experiences in my life. Same thing with something like this. I've tried to figure out how can I structure a conversation, or how can I initiate this conversation in a way that's going to let me know if this person has a good intent, bad intent, whatever it is. I can't figure it out. I have no idea. So I try and give everyone the benefit of the doubt and let time do its thing, and then we'll figure it out over the course of time. But there's really no way for me to know immediately. But I think over time, yeah, you just learn, you figure it out. And so, yeah, that's been one of the most amazing parts of hanging with you. And that's one of the things that I respect the most about this podcast and what you do is in this day and age, it's very difficult for people to imagine spending time on something that is not done for monetary value, right? It's people have a really hard time understanding, well, why would you do a podcast if it's not going to make you money? It's like, oh, because I think it's like, number one, I really enjoy it. And like the conversations could make me a better human. It could make me a better husband, make me a better father. Like it's everything nowadays, especially here in the States, is like, well, how are you going to make a living out of that? How are you going to make money out of that? It's like, why the fuck is that all we talk
Yeah.
about? Why is that the marker of, is this worth it or not? Like, it's pretty crazy to me. And so I love that. It's like, listen, like you're not trying to sell something. You just want to have wonderful conversations that could be beneficial for you and beneficial for those who decide to listen. It's just, yeah, I love that you focus on that. And if money comes from it, wonderful. If not, it's not the point of it. And that's
No,
great.
no. And selfishly, I'm recording this and this will go out as a podcast, but having got to know you a little bit better, it just been an opportunity for us to have a catch up and have a chat anyway. I've had a couple of friends, close friends that are peers that as well, that have said to me about my mailing list a couple of times. They're like, I read your emails because I'm invested in you. They're just so long. I'm like, I know, but like sometimes I don't have the intent on. Like, there's no. I find writing incredibly cathartic for me. It helps me formalize my own thoughts, and sometimes when I formalize those, because I'm really caught up, I guess more so since maybe it's age and experience, wisdom, we're putting air quotations, but people need all the informed information to decipher their own ways to think and
Yep.
to form their own opinions. I think there's such a reliance and a weight on being told what to do these days. So
Yeah.
I'm very much an advocate for teaching people how to think for themselves so you can formulate their own opinions and whatnot, not telling them what to do all the time. Essentially it's like coaching. What we do is autonomy on some level, and it's empowering people to have the skills to define their own variation and definition of whatever you're talking about. So when I write lengthy emails, sometimes it might just be like a cathartic writing session for me. And I think, there's a few things that I've come to realize out of this that might resonate with a few. There isn't a sales pitch in there, but there might be in the future. Like I'm not that deliberate in everything I do because
Yeah.
everything has become so monetized, as you said, like capitalism rules. Or there's nothing. I'm not anti-capitalist, by the way.
Yeah.
What makes the world go round. We all need money to live and everything else, but I think it can detract from real human connection sometimes, and especially in our line of work, health, well-being is real, honest human connection is a rarity. And getting older, it's harder to make friends. And when you seek and find, lots of interesting new people, it's important to grab hold of those things. I think if it
Dude,
doesn't sound too cheesy.
no, I'm with you 100%. Like I'm very pro capitalism. But just because I'm pro capitalism doesn't mean there aren't flaws with it. Like there are also flaws, and it's not even necessarily, there are flaws with it, but it's not that that the flaws with capitalism are the issue, but that what happens as a result of some people being so focused on it. And it's like no one it'd be very weird if you introduced yourself to someone who's like, hey, I'm Jordan and I'm a capitalist. Like that would be fucking weird, right?
You should try that as a conversation starter at a party.
It's like but I think that's how many people have built their life around, everything is about making money. That's it. That's their value. That's what they care about. They're not going to do it if it's not going to make them money. And we see this everywhere. Like chart, like everything needs to be worth your time. If you're not making money for it, then it's not worth it. It's like there are so many things that you could gain from this that have nothing to do with making money at all. But if your entire worldview is just about making more money, that I think is a big fucking problem.
Mm,
And in terms of what you're talking about, your emails, this is like my own unsolicited business advice is anyone who tells you that your content is too long, don't fucking listen to them, because time and time again, long form content wins in terms of, actually, if we're going to go towards making more money, long form content is infinitely better for a number of reasons. But one of the best pieces of business advice I ever got is from a book, wonderful book. It's an old book, very old. It was like written, I believe, in the 1920s or something. It's called Scientific Advertising. And it's so great because it was written well before social media. It was written like when most business was and advertising was done in newspapers, things like that. The best business advice was, don't take business advice from your friends or family, because your friends and family, like, they are not going to be your customers
mm,
at all. And they often have your best interest at heart, but because they have your best interest at heart, they don't understand what's actually best for business. And so just, there's so many ways we could talk about this, but from a content perspective, everything right now is short, 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 short. And everyone is trying to make their content shorter and shorter and shorter because they think that shorter content is going to all of a sudden make people want to watch their all of their content. Well, here, something I've learned is, and I've made this percentage up, but I think it's holds true. 97% of people in the world won't give a shit about anything you have to say ever. Period. 97% of people won't care at all. Doesn't matter if it's 10,000 words or 100 words. They don't give a shit what you're talking about. 3% of people will care so much about everything that you have to say. And if you write 10,000 words, they will read 10,000 words and be happier for it. But if you only write 100 words, they're going to feel shortchanged because you didn't actually give the nuance. You didn't discuss what they really wanted you to dive into. When you make short form content to appease the 97% of people, you're actually not giving enough to the 3% of people who love and adore and care about you. And we can look at the success of the best sales copy and the best overall from a monetary perspective, like which ones had the highest conversion rates. Long form content, long form sales pages, long form YouTube videos, long form podcasts. Fuck, if people say your emails are too long, then they shouldn't be listening to this podcast at this point, right? It's we're almost an hour in. It's like, that's a long fucking piece of content to consume. So a lot of people would say if it takes you an hour to consume a piece of content, then it's not a good piece of content. Meanwhile, here they are listening to an hour long plus piece of content. It's, do not listen to the people who tell you to make it more brief, because it shouldn't be longer for the sake of being longer. That's what she said. It shouldn't be longer for the sake of being longer, but as long as
love
there's
that, crowbar that in on every occasion, please.
as long as there's substance to it and it's helpful,
Mm,
the longer the better. It actually
yeah.
is people, the people who really care about it. It'll be a small percentage of people, but those are the people who are going to love you the most. You're going to be diehard fans, your diehard customers, and that's the people who really, really matters. Don't make it shorter and more brief to appease the people who don't give a shit anyway.
I think that there's so much value in what you've just said, and I think there's a comfort in that, comfort and reassurance for a lot of the people that are listening. I know, obviously, we didn't set this up for you to give as much value as you did, but there you go. There's a pearl of wisdom right there. Firstly, that confirms all my biases and it fits my narrative, so I will accept your unsolicited advice, and because you are you. But also, as you said, it's the way that everything is marketed now. I think you only get real insight, and I think this performative nature of social media is people give you a snapshot of who they are. You can only really get to know someone once you've had exposure to a lot of them, right? And I think that's what I love about podcasts so much, is that it's just mates having a chat. And if people want a real insight into who you are, what you value, what you experience in life, what your experiences have led to, then they listen to a podcast and they see longer form. I don't think in sound bites, I don't talk in sound bites. The people I work with, I don't communicate with them in sound bites. So, if we are thinking about it from a business standpoint as well, that's not how I work anyway. But I think with this push and a lot of the messaging in the fitness space at the moment is everyone is trying to emulate someone else. So it's
Mm.
almost, there's this prompt to be authentic, but contradictory to that is by pushing you to be someone that you're not is inauthentic. So you're inauthentically being authentic, which makes no sense. It's an oxymoron. So when it comes to advising people on their content and what to do and what not to do, if it's a counter to everything that makes them feel ease in the space, because it's a bit of a game, right? Like if you're gonna create, and there are a lot of reasons why I get occasionally a bit stunted or I get a bit despondent with it is because I might not have the time necessary to do the length of it as I would, like sitting down and having a chat like this, is for me to push myself to do 10-second reel on nothing. It just isn't me, and it's
Yeah.
unlikely to, as you say, appease anyone, and definitely wouldn't satisfy the people that already maybe do enjoy one or two things I have to say. And I'd like to think that yours is a bit more long form as well.
100, dude. The vast majority of my content is YouTube and podcast, which are,
Mm.
dude, I get my
Your
YouTube videos.
production is insane, by the way. Kudos
Thank you.
on the
I
production,
appreciate it. It
the
used to not
sound
be.
quality, the visuals, everything.
So I started making content in July of 2011 is when I started writing articles. And if you go back to my, obviously my website now looks very different than the first website I had when I started in 2011 in my college dorm room. There are comments. I never delete comments. And so the
Mm.
comments they're there when I first started writing articles, there were people who would say, "Hey, amazing information, but why does your website look like shit?" Because I didn't have the money to pay for a website design. So I used, at the time, it was a free WordPress
Mm.
template. And now WordPress templates look beautiful, the free options. Then they looked awful and it was hard to read. It was very disorganized, but I didn't have the money to pay for it. So I was like, this is what I have to do. And actually, if you go back into my podcast reviews to when I first started it in 2017, 2018, you'll see, because at first I was like, I don't need a microphone. It's fine. Some of the first reviews were, again, amazing information, but your sound quality is awful. I'm having trouble listening to it. And that the only reason I ended up getting a microphone was just because, like, I knew people were not going to be able to listen to it because it was like
Mm.
echoey and it wasn't really good. But going to the short form, long form stuff, I think that people are so focused on trying to get more followers that they lose sight of the purpose of it, which is really to help people. And it's very ironic because when your goal is to help people, everything becomes so much easier. And it becomes so much less stressful. When the goal is to get more followers, well, if you lose followers, now you think you're a failure, right? But let's say you lose followers, but you get a message from someone saying that changed my life. Well, it was worth it. Now it's like, cool. I don't care if I lost followers because this person told me that changed their life. It's like, amazing. I'm going to keep doing it. When your goal is to help people, odds are you're going to spend more time on longer form content than shorter form content because you can't really help people in 30 seconds or 60 seconds. That's a soundbite designed to try and go viral, to try and get more followers. Getting more followers, like being happy that you're getting more followers, is like being very happy that you got more monopoly money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It means, when I say it means nothing, I could not be more sincere. It means nothing.
Have
Whereas,
you watched Black Mirror, the episode?
no,
You've
no.
never watched Black Mirror?
Is it good?
I mean, Black Mirror is a series on Netflix, and there's an episode called Nosedive, and it's about this dystopian future where essentially people are assessed everything on the number of likes, the equivalence of likes on that. That gives them access to buy new homes, new cars. They're rating as human beings, and everyone else can see your ratings, and we're essentially still there. The reason why I mention that is because rationally, I think people know that. I know that, right? I know
Yeah.
that my worth isn't reflected in my number of followers. But then I do think there's also some, unfortunately, a sad truth in sometimes it does open doors to certain opportunities. So
Yeah. Yep.
an example would be is that I know I was pitched to feature as a nutritionist on a TV show, and they were all for it once seeing my content until they visited my Instagram page and they
Um,
saw that I didn't have 10,000 followers, a minimum of 10,000 followers. Now that's just one of those things, but it's I do I'm an aware person. That felt shitty at the time. It does. I can rationalize that now. But I think for someone, especially younger generation, where they've only existed with social media, that can really have a knock-on effect to people's self-worth and their self-esteem.
I 100%. I absolutely agree. It can have a knock on their self-esteem, their self-worth if they don't get the opportunity because they don't have enough followers. What's ironic is if you do get the opportunity because you have enough followers, well, then oftentimes you have a different situation where you're like, well, I only got this opportunity
Mm,
because of my followers and not because of my knowledge, not because of they like what I have to say, because then it's like, well, they really don't care about what you have to say. They care about what you could bring them.
yeah,
Right. So if they're only bringing you on, if you have X number of followers, it's no longer about the quality of what you're saying. It's no longer about what you believe and what you stand by and what you was really meaningful to you. It's like, how much business can they get from having you on?
yeah,
And now that's when you start to realize it's like, oh, it's like they just want something from you.
yeah.
That's the
So
only reason they're
it's
bringing you
well, it's a
on.
relationship.
So it's sort of a lose-lose situation when you think about it, because
Yeah,
if you don't get on, you feel bad because you don't have enough followers. You do get on, you only get on because you have enough followers.
yeah,
It's a really fucked up mental situation, and that's why when I say it means nothing, I mean it means nothing from the perspective of your happiness and fulfillment as a human has no bearing on how many followers you have. And it will not positively impact your life just because you have more followers. I think it, and I think one of the greatest blessings that I've been able to have is I started doing this in 2011 before Instagram existed and before really short form content existed. When I started, it was all long form YouTube videos and website articles. And when you start out in that time frame, and especially with YouTube and website, I would work for a week, 16, 18, 20, 24 hours on one article. It would be a 2,000, 3,000 word article, thinking of what article I'm going to write, researching the article, writing the article, editing the article, formatting the article. It takes a whole fucking week to do this thing. And when you publish it, and especially when you don't have any audience, no one sees it. So you don't get immediate likes. You don't get immediate feedback. Like, I publish it knowing that no one's going to see it for a long time if they ever do. And I think that helped me understand I had to separate my self-worth from the reaction to my content. That, for me, I think set me up for a lot of success, not like more follower success, but like success in terms of my mental health and my emotional health and my self-worth, in knowing that the amount of followers, the amount of likes I get has literally nothing to do with the type of human that I am and my value or self-worth as a human. Whereas now I think a lot of people very deeply believe that if they are not getting a lot of likes or a lot of followers from their content, that they must not be likable. They must not be valuable. They must not be a good enough person or a likable enough person. And it couldn't be more false. It is a completely made up thing in our minds, our
mm,
collective minds. And that's why when I say, yeah, you could get more opportunities from having more followers. But when you start getting opportunities because you have more followers, it actually fucks with your head,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah, yeah.
like, it's a big, big, big mind fuck.
Yeah. I mean, again, back to you being an incredibly emotionally intelligent person, I do think there is a depth of thought and understanding of these things that, not again, not as a slight on anyone else, but they don't have because they don't necessarily care. Like, I know people have the ambitions of, I want to go onto a reality TV program because I want to come out with these number of followers because I want to, and that is a credible career for people. When you find out influencers are getting paid 20 grand for one grid post for an ad, and it doesn't necessarily matter what they're posting. That can be diet products that make you shit yourself. That can be anything, as long as they're getting paid for it. And that I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I think with activism specialist causes, because my theory is when you have someone with many followers, and don't get me wrong, this isn't a black and white thing, but especially when they're activists for especially important causes, is you have this thing is like sad fishing, they have to give their account or their version of something, rather than actually you'll have people in a community that are doing really important work out there that don't have a following. Use the opportunity to elevate those people, put they share their content or put them on an Instagram live if you really care about the cause. But I think it's quite telling when you have these people with however millions of followers, but they kind of want to keep it all for themselves. And then the next post is an ad for toothpaste or something like that, which is quite
Dude,
typical. My
yeah.
friend, I feel like I could chat to you forever, but I am also hugely aware this is your Sunday. This is a family day, and I know I'm going to speak to you in the near future.
Yeah, you're coming on my podcast next. So I'm
Oh,
I'm very
thank
excited
you.
about
That is,
that.
yeah, when you suggested that, I was like, I didn't even know that was part of the deal, man. I just wanted to talk to you on mine.
Dude, of course it's part of the deal. And it's going to be a long podcast, so you better
It'd
be
be
ready.
it'd be an honor whenever that happens, it happens. But yeah, anytime anyway, even if they're not recorded, I'm more than happy to catch up at any point. Just for the sake of it, if people do want to and they've been living under a rock, they don't know where to find you, where can they find you? What are you up to? Can we hear a bit more about the inner circle, maybe?
No, I'm not pitching the inner circle. If
Okay.
you want to follow me, Google my name, Jordan Syatt. I have a podcast, Instagram, all of that. But to be honest, you have an amazing podcast here with Dan. You don't need to change your podcast. You don't need to change your content. You got everything you need with Dan. If you're not on his email list, Dan, put your link to your email list in the description so people can sign up for your list. Long emails coming your way, but they're amazing emails. I'm sure of it. And dude, thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you, sir. You are too kind. You are every bit the decent human that I imagined you to be. And yeah, I look forward to seeing our relationship blossom over the years. If you did moderately enjoy what you've heard today, please do subscribe, like, and all that. This is Ramblings of a Madman. I need to stop getting people that are talking good sense on here and maybe keep my rambles to myself. Until next time.